News. Good morning. Hope you're after a great Monday so far. Good start to your week. And we have a really big news week ahead. We can't really say that about every week, but this week in particular, we have some very big stories that could lead to some very consequential decisions that could affect multiple parts of our life. So what I'm going to do is sort of work through them, kind of touch on them lightly, a little bit of like a bippity boppity boop on these news stories to kind of give you some broad strokes. And as we get more information this week, we'll be able to kind of dig into these issues more substantially. But on a Monday after a Halloween weekend, I'm just going to ease into it. Broad strokes so you know what's going on, and then a little bit of a deeper dive later. So I think it's important to know where the president is. The president is in Glasgow, Scotland. There's a major climate change summit that is there, that is part of the United Nations. And what's really important to note about this is not just the topic that is being discussed, but that it's not just the president there. The president is there along with other world leaders, but also some really important leaders from our country as well. A large group of the president's cabinet is attending, along with what I saw is about an estimate of 50 lawmakers that are there. So it's not just the president that is participating in this summit. And the topic of the summit is global climate change. And there's going to be this broad conversation today. And in fact, I'm looking over because I have it live up on my computer to see when the president's speaking. He should be speaking any moment, actually, as we're talking right now. So what we're looking for is what are world leaders saying about climate change? What are they promising to do? But a lot of what we're going to be seeing at this United Nations meeting is talk, and the question is going to be about action. And of course, we're always looking for that on any big issue. And like any big issue, the topic of climate change has a lot of different opinions about how exactly different communities and the global community should look at this. So we'll be watching for headlines out of that. What's interesting is the backdrop to this for the president, of course, is America is looking at a social spending plan. Before he left on the trip, he gave a framework for this social spending plan that did not previously have agreement amongst Democrats. And he said, now I think we do have agreement. One of the issues in this social spending plan has been the issue of global climate change as well. And what is the United States promising to do as a nation? So we're kind of looking at different layers of this issue, both on a global stage, but also on a domestic stage as well. And again, as we get more information, I'll let you know. What's interesting is that although we're looking at potentially legislation moving in the United States on the social spending plan, we don't have all the details of that yet. We don't have a vote schedule on that yet. So a lot of unknowns as exactly how this story will develop, but an important thing just to keep in mind. The backdrop for the global community to a conversation on global climate change, of course, is the pandemic, something else that we share. And today, an interesting report from the Associated Press highlighted that we've crossed 5 million deaths around the world because of the disease COVID-19. Those deaths are disproportionately in areas that have more advanced economies like the United States and have arguably better healthcare. But people in those communities live longer, can live with illness longer. And you know that more severe cases of COVID-19 are often in those subgroups. And so kind of tying that back to global climate change and the conversation on that is a question about how new policies can affect economies that are already hit hard by the pandemic. You don't want to slow down these economies that are also supporting other communities around the world, especially during a time of emerging from a pandemic or attempting to, and trying to make sure that everybody has economies that are flourishing, because that's ultimately what we want. On that issue, you know, there's been a lot of, I don't know if you guys have seen this in the news, but I certainly have, and it bothers me. And you know I'm always going to talk to you about what bothers me in the news. It's the one area that I will step outside of my nonpartisan, no opinion sort of delivery and say, hey, listen, let's be aware of this because it's affecting the way that the story is being told. Have you guys noticed that depending on what network or news site you might be looking at, there's different attitudes about vaccinated and unvaccinated? So sometimes you'll get someone that's saying, hey, you know, there's someone that got sick from COVID-19, but they were unvaccinated. That's how. And then you'll get someone else in another network or writing in a way saying, you know, someone got sick from COVID-19 and they were vaccinated, you know, you're like, okay, listen, I don't want any of you all to get sick regardless of your vaccination status, I want to be very clear with Smarter News. We want to give you the best information we can on this developing story, which is the pandemic. There's a lot of different opinions on this. I'm noticing it this weekend. Press Secretary Jen Psaki tested positive for COVID-19. She's not with the president, by the way. So you're getting some of that tone. On the other end, you're getting, more reporting of people with COVID cases being amongst the unvaccinated. I just want to be very clear that neither tone is really appropriate. I don't want anyone to get sick. I don't even want you to get a cold. I really don't. I just want you to be healthy and happy and for us to move on. We're going to be looking a lot at different treatments for COVID-19 because there's not a lot of them. We are going to be focused on vaccines this week because we are getting news on that particular topic. And listen, there was a late night announcement by Moderna that put out that the FDA is going to be delaying their assessment of the Moderna vaccine for those under the age of 17. They applied for emergency use authorization a couple months ago. The FDA is like, hey, listen, we're not actually going to be able to assess this for a couple more months. And the issue is myocarditis cases amongst this group. We don't know any specifics on that. We just know that the FDA is asking for more time. Moderna provided that information in their announcement on this. But obviously that's been an issue that we've talked about, myocarditis as a rare but important side effect of these COVID-19 vaccines, Moderna included. So that's something to watch. In the meantime, though, you had the Pfizer vaccine that received emergency use authorization from the FDA for those 5 to 11, so even a younger age group. The CDC is going to be looking at the guidelines or guidance for that vaccine for that particular age group this week over the next couple days. So it is conceivable, depending on what the CDC advises, that children that young could receive the COVID-19 vaccine soon. Could we say this week? Maybe. What I'm going to be watching very specifically is whether or not there's a thinner lane for the guidance. We saw with boosters, this initially, right? That it was for people that were particularly high risk that could receive a booster shot, or those that are maybe a little bit older. When we were watching the FDA advisory panel meeting on this issue, one of the doctors raised a question about whether or not giving emergency use authorization to this vaccine would empower state mandates for kids, and that he was uncomfortable with that. And so I'm going to be watching twofold. Does the CDC say any kid, 5 to 11 can get this vaccine? Or we particularly recommend this vaccine for a certain group of children. And then the second thing I'm going to be watching is a state like California. The governor already came out and said, we're going to mandate this vaccine for kids in schools. This was several weeks ago. So what is some of the second and third order effects of that? But you should know that that's happening this week. So I want you aware of that. Meantime, I told you it's going to be a big week. The Supreme Court today is looking at a major case. You've heard about this Texas abortion law that was passed, that went into effect in early September, I believe. Now, what's important to know about this law is that it's the enforcement mechanism that's very different. Basically, the law limits abortions after a 6-week period in pregnancy. The mechanism for doing so is different and empowers private citizens to sue abortion providers or anyone that is helping someone get an abortion after that time period. This is effectively, depending on what reports you're looking at, has slowed down or completely eliminated abortion access in Texas because there's a fear of what these lawsuits could look like for abortion providers or otherwise. The Supreme Court, this was not a case that the Supreme Court was going to look at this session. They decided to. So this has been majorly expedited in a historic way. And, just simplifying it, the federal government is saying to Texas, you can't do this. This law is not legal. And Texas is saying, yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah, it is. That's very broad. But this is what the Supreme Court is going to be looking at today. And what I'm going to be watching for before we dive into more specifics is the justices get to ask both sides some questions. And we get to hear that. And that'll give us an indication about how they're looking at this case, because it's something they haven't really seen before. And what else is interesting about this, most cases that we hear, for example, we're going to be hearing about a case the Supreme Court will be at the beginning of December on the Mississippi abortion law. This is another controversial law that never was allowed to go into effect. The Texas law was. We would expect a decision to know how the Supreme Court is going to decide on that case by next June. So June 2022. The possibility for this Texas case is that we could hear something maybe by the end of the year because it's a pressing issue and the law is in effect. So that'll be really interesting to watch and important. Okay. Just want to offer a quick friendly reminder here. I know we just got done with Halloween, but we're like 25 days away from Thanksgiving. And there's a report that this is going to be one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive Thanksgiving dinner that families are going to have to buy. When you look at the, a collection of items that you could buy for Thanksgiving, your cranberry sauce, your pumpkins, your potatoes, whatever you have. I'm curious what you guys have for your Thanksgiving because of food prices and inflation and supply issues. I mean, all the things that you're dealing with. And if we can take this story full circle, this is one of the criticisms of the climate change issue to be the priority of the administration and even the social spending bill, because you have some critics that say, hey, listen, this is not the major issue facing American citizens. We have other big issues that we need to solve right now, like these supply issues. The other side of that is that you have supporters of climate change saying, listen, we don't have any more time. We have to move on this now. Otherwise, these issues are going to get rougher. So I just want to bring that full circle. But if you're looking at your grocery store runs and you're thinking, wow, things got more expensive, it's because they are more expensive, and they're more expensive for a variety of different reasons. Quick anecdote. I was in the grocery store yesterday. This is my investigative reporting. And I was looking at pumpkins, canned pumpkins, and it was just like this very small selection. And I was talking to another lady. We were talking about canned pumpkins because, that's what you do in the grocery store. And I was getting a couple cans and I said, well, I want to get a couple cans now because, you never know. And then the guy, I don't know if he was the manager of the grocery store, and he's like, nah, you're fine. We got a couple thousand in the back. Don't worry. And then he says, and this is what's interesting. He said, I just want to let you know all of our Thanksgiving items will be out by November 10th. So that would be the middle of next week. This is one grocery store in America, but it's a major chain. He said, everything will be out that's available. So if you want to get a head start, it's going to be out. And I said, well, what happens if you're that person that goes the night before Thanksgiving dinner? He said, don't do that. So anyways, just words to the wise. I thought that was kind of like an interesting thing to pick up. I don't know if it applies nationwide, but maybe it's just a hint. Listen, things are getting more expensive. You might hit supply issues. So a little bit early shopping never hurt anybody. All right, that's your big report for Monday morning. I think we did a lot. I mean, I hope we feel accomplished after this. Don't you? Right? We got a lot done. We covered a lot of different topics. I'll review my notes a little bit, make sure I got everything taken care of. If you have questions and comments on any of these stories, you want to do a little deeper dive on any of them, let me know. In our comment section on social media, you could always email us hello@smarternews.com. I'll be curious which ones you would like us to focus on more as we're tackling a lot of these big issues. Global climate change, the economy, the pandemic, what's going on with abortion law in America, and then just what's going on your kitchen table, because that's really important too, and we don't want to forget that. All right. Hope you feel a little bit smarter today. Have a great day. And I'll have all these stories, several of them new already on the website, smarternews.com. Don't forget, you can always find us there. All right, have a great week. Talk to you later.